Good evening, everyone. This is the March 20th, 2018 Special Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council. If there are anyone in the audience tonight wishing to speak to any item on the agenda, we would ask that you fill out the speaker request form and kindly give that to City Clerk Sue Herman during the meeting, and we will take that up when we get to that item on the agenda. Roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Here.
Finucane?
Here.
Marquardt? Fagan?
Here.
Noriko?
Here.
Verbeck?
Here.
Favor? Smith?
Here.
6 present.
I'd like to inform council that Alderman Marquardt will probably not be here tonight. If it does walk in, it will be late. I did get a email within the last couple of hours from Alderman Favor. He will be here, however, he is going to be a little bit late. Okay? Tonight's presentation is basically a budget workshop comprised of several items and a couple of reports. The first item, service level overview, does have a consideration from one of our aldermen, I understand.
Yeah,
Alderman Fagan.
I'd like to bring that up. Because it was brought in on Monday, and there's some questions on OMA. I don't think it's really that much of a, I mean, they just brought in more of the information, but just to make it simplified for everyone, let's just take that off if we could, and what was added on, that from Monday from the revision.
So you're moving that the selection of the FY 2018 line item presentation be deferred
If we could.
or be deleted from tonight's agenda?
Yes, I'd like to bring that.
Okay.
If I get a second.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Prior to council voting on that, Molly, our finance director, Molly Talkington, was going to address that item. I don't know if you've drawn the short straw or the good-sized straw tonight by having that happen, Molly, but do you have any comments regarding the consideration to remove this item from the agenda for tonight's presentation?
My only comment is because there were 4 options on there and trying to kind of address the 4 different types of information that was asked for at the last council meeting. If it's removed from consideration, could we then follow up with like the online survey like we did with the budget request for city council to look at it independently, and then we'll come back with the survey results at the next meeting as a means to facilitate this, since we're getting kind of close to each meeting coming up here.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, the items that were added on to the line item presentation, I'm asking for that to be brought off. So if there was anything on there before that with the original agenda.
Okay, so for options, to clarify, options 1, 2, and 3 of the line item presentations you'd still like to discuss tonight is option 4 that was added yesterday. Is
Yes.
the one that is being removed?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, as long
From
as we,
this
yeah,
evening.
we just want to find out what the kind of information you want to give to us.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, are you comfortable with that then, Pat?
Yes.
You made that motion to delete. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Finucane?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Pat and Molly, thank you. So moving right along, we have under considerations the Police Department report, and I'd ask Deputy Chief John Petrogallo to step to the podium and make that presentation. John?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight I'll be providing you with a service level review for the Police Department. In an effort to reach our overarching goal of reducing crime in the community, The police department must continuously review its service level capabilities due to fiscal and staffing limitations. Engaging in this practice enables the department to find efficiencies, alternative ways of delivering services to the community to help best maintain exceptional service. What is service level review? In a word, it's analysis. What we do as a department, we analyze our day-to-day services, our deployment strategies, which are data-driven, our programming, our staffing, and I'd like to note that this is not a new practice for us. When Chief Lowry first came to us, he challenged us all to think about work in a different way. He wanted us to think about work, trying to find more efficient, more effective ways of doing work. So that is what we do. I could provide you an example of something that I was involved in some years ago. It was my first project, was a staff study, just to give you an idea of what we've already accomplished. I went to the records management system, our CAD, and obtained a full year's worth of calls for service. I broke it down by the hour, by the day of the week. So we were able to put on a bar graph every call that happened in every hour of a 24-hour day to see how many calls occurred in that hour all year long on average. So we looked at calls by the hour, we looked at by the days of the week, and we started to look at seasons of the year, whether or not NIU was in session or if it was not in session, our slow times, and we staffed our personnel with the data that we obtained with this. So when calls were low, we evolved our staffing and we lessened it a bit, and then when calls were high, we increased our staffing levels. So this was an evidence-based decision-making process that we use with this data. And we're very proud of that because we found a lot of efficiencies and was a better use of our personnel because they were placed where they were really needed. Our calls for service has risen from year to year, climbing from about 39,000 in 2011 to about 52,000 in 2017. Also, the city experienced increases in drug and weapons-related offenses. This had some negative effects on our officers and personnel. When you have a high call volume and serious crime, it exhausts your resources and your personnel. Exhausted personnel can be prone to injury, sickness, which will create a higher back situation, or can create a higher back situation, which will further exacerbate the problem with the men and women that are coming in on higher back will be faced with that same exhaustion, sickness, injury, with the potential of those. So this is a cycle that we do what we can to break. Sorry about that. So this is a chart that show our authorized staffing levels, our actual staffing levels. So you could see from 2013 to current, we went from 62 to 65. The actual numbers are interesting because very infrequently are we ever at our authorized strength due to injuries, retirements, etc. So one of the most notable numbers in my mind is the fourth column where you see actual patrol officer staffing. It's those officers that handle all the calls for service. So those 35 in 2017 answered 52,000 plus calls in that year, and it averaged out to be about 1,490 calls per officer. It's pretty astounding. So with those service demands, the officers are required to work more, shortages increase officers' hours, which can lead to fatigue, burnout, and stress. And during times of extended minimum staffing levels, the department has experienced an increase, again, amount of injuries. And you can see in the chart that a difference between 16 and 17, we have from 3 to 5 injuries as a result of foot pursuits. The biggest change here are injuries from arrests where the offender was resisting, which has more than doubled from 7 to 16. So all in total, 20 injuries that officers sustained in 16 and 31 in 17. So to accomplish our mission in crime reduction, we have the police department. We have 65 officers, 11 full-time, 6 part-time telecommunicators, and special services civilian staff to accomplish this mission. I'd like to point out that even with all these challenges that we have, the men and women of the department still find a way to accomplish significant achievements, and they did so in 17. First, in 2017, we observed an 11% decrease in violent crime as compared to 2016. We also observed a 10% decrease in property crimes as compared to 2016. We continued our efforts with our co-policing efforts with Northern Illinois University Police Department, which was a challenge for both of us. With limited staffing, they're experiencing the same things, fiscal and staffing limitations as we are, but we're still finding a way to still engage this partnership and make a difference. We've made significant strides in our PSAP consolidation, public safety answering point, and that continues. The International City County Managers Association awarded Camp Power with the Health and Safety Award, and we're very proud to be a part of that. The crossing guard transition to District 428, that has freed up a substantial amount of resources from our department that we can reallocate to different areas that have a greater need. Project Hope, it's the heroin outreach prevention and education program, is designed to mitigate the opioid crisis in our community, and it's facing the entire nation as well. We're working very closely with the State's Attorney's Office as well as other outside policing agencies to make this happen. The Safe Streets Initiative, which is the crime reduction initiative through parking restrictions, Phase 1 has been approved by council already and is being implemented. Phase 2 will be before you next Monday night, and we currently are continually engaging stakeholders in the affected neighborhoods to try to make this the best product that we can. We applied for and were awarded a federal mental health grant for in the amount of $75,000, and what this did is it brought in a part-time mental health coordinator to design a program where we could work in real time with a mental health specialist and the police, where they're partnered, and they can deal with a mental health crisis in real time. So that is something that you'll hear more about, and we're very excited about it. We also applied for and were awarded a grant for a crime analyst with the Illinois National Guard. And originally we anticipated having a part-time crime analyst when in fact we obtained a full-time crime analyst that is attached to our investigations division, and it's free of charge. So this Aaron McCauley is the analyst, and he works very closely with investigations and the targeted response unit, which are responsible for drug and gang investigations. We're very proud of the fall of 2017 shooting arrest. The uptick in gun violence that happened last fall affected us all, and our officers, street officers, telecommunicators, and our investigators worked very tirelessly to include outside police agencies to deal with this problem, and we were able to make 12 arrests. And I would note that the Halloween shooting where there was a female victim, that is still ongoing, and we expect charges and additional arrests. So more to come on that. Late summer of last year, we had a 25-day offender sweep, and we collaborated with other outside policing agencies to include the Federal Marshals, Illinois Department of Corrections, Illinois State Police, our surrounding police agencies who are always a help to us. And we did this targeting trespassing offenses, drug, weapons offenses, and warrant service. And in those 25 days, I know you've heard some of these numbers before, but this is quite an accomplishment. 243 arrests were made for 297 misdemeanors and 77 felony arrests. Very substantial and very effective in our goal of reducing crime, made an impact. 9 firearms were seized and 79 arrest warrants were served. So as we find times where we're having difficulties in certain areas, certain divisions, mainly with high demands for service, we need to, again, look at how we deliver these services and decide if we need to realign our resources to meet the need. So these are done on a continual basis, and we adapt to demands in real time. Some of the things that we have done, some of the realignments that we have created to increase the strength in patrol are, we postponed the resident officer program we postponed the resident officer program temporarily and placed that officer on patrol to add to the shift strength. That being said, Sebastian Lemus, Officer Lemus, is scheduled to move into the resident officer house, and I believe it's beginning of April. So in a limited capacity, he will be working as the resident officer in that neighborhood. And when we get back up to staff, we intend on making him an increased figure in that neighborhood. We have continued 2 vacancies in the investigations division, which has been a hardship on them, especially with the cases that they've been looking into. But that we have allocated the folks that would have taken those 2 positions and just left them on patrol to maintain that shift strength. Personnel changes were delayed in the targeted response unit. Specialty assignments were left vacant. Examples are field training officers, bicycle officers, and special operations team. And we have the targeted response unit that are responsible for gang and drug investigations. The bicycle officers are the same. They really do a great job with the same types of investigations. We've maintained minimum shift strength through increased overtime and training delays. Command staff and outside agencies are relied on to staff special events and support problem-oriented policing details. And I will describe these as we follow the data, and when we make a query into our system and it shows where the problem is, that's where we're putting our cops. That's where we're putting our assets and resources. Deputy Chief Holy's position, his rank was eliminated to add another patrol body to that shift strength. Added overtime for problem-oriented policing details, and we've substantially increased those details up in the northwest quadrant of the city, and we feel that it has a direct effect in the reduction of crime. Command staff will fill in for first-line supervisors when they are not available. Community engagement events and departmental programming have been limited based on staffing. And the community relations and training officer that we all know, Kelly Sullivan, was reassigned to investigations to fill in one of the 2 vacancies, just on a limited basis until we get back up to staffing. And once we do, she will be reassigned and will resume her duties. Success through the service level review. Again, we've been doing this for years, and we continue to analyze the data, and it helps direct us where to put our resources. to meet the demands for service that we have. To that end, we continue to see progress in crime reduction efforts, and we're proud to be here tonight to tell you that. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Alderman Fagan?
Deputy Chief, how much more are we spending from last year, let's say 2016 to 2017 in overtime?
I know by budget, we were 145%. So I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number, but
Right.
I'd have to get back to you for the number. Molly, do you by chance have it?
Yeah, I can look at it right now. It'll take me a minute, so I'll go back.
Oh,
to
no
it.
problem. That's a problem.
We'll put that answer in advance here. Alderman Noriko.
And my question is somewhat related to that. To what extent would overtime be reduced if you were at the approved staffing level?
Well, I would say in general terms, it would be reduced. Now, the consideration is, what is that data telling us? What are the trends telling us? So if we have a spike in crime like we did in the fall of 17, I would imagine overtime is going to escalate because we have to meet that demand and, and solve the quality of life concerns that we're faced with. But I would say in general terms that if we are up to full staff, there is no reason why overtime would not be reduced. It would just be dependent on the types of calls that investigations that we have to handle.
And to a certain extent, you can't totally predict how much additional overtime or what the spikes in overtime might be because of unknown events. I mean, you don't necessarily know when and where there will be spikes in crime activity.
Correct. I mean, we do look at the data, and, since, we're not a really large city, typically the highest concentration of crime has been up in the northwest quadrant. So we look at the data, and if it happens to be in a certain block on a certain street, we will focus our assets there. As far as predicting, I mean, there is some predicting that we can do based on times of the year, kind of like the data I talked about in the staff study. We were able to make assumptions of when during the day calls for service would be lower and when they would be higher. And in this case, when the students are in session and the population is higher, and in the warmer months, we tend to have higher activity. So we expect the overtime, especially around special events during Corn Fest and move-in weekend, homecoming, we tend to have increased overtime. And then when it gets to seasons when the students are not in session or the colder months, we experience lower overtime and lower call volume. So there is some predictive measures we can take, but
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Molly, do you have the answer to
I-
Alderman Fagan's question?
I do. On the very first memo you received, the overview one on page 5 is that first option example. So if you look at that, the police overtime on the summary, if we skip the 2016.5 year because it's only 6 months, if you look 2016 to 2017, it was an increase of just under $12,000, so 2% increase. And then 17 estimate to the 18 budget was a 3% increase, just short of $16,000.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Fanouken.
Deputy Chief, with the downward enrollment at Northern, obviously the population up in the northwest quadrant has changed quite a bit. What do you attribute the increased crime in that area to then?
Well, I would say crime generally follows poverty, so I know there's some aspect to that. You know, it could take, I know the 2017 shootings that we had frightened the community, as it should have, but it took two groups that were rival gangs from another town to relocate to our town to really put a spike in gun violence in our community. So, you know, it really, it can be dependent on who's committing that violence. Is it somebody that is a resident here, or is it somebody that is not a resident here that's coming to our town to victimize our citizens? So I think that it's variable. You never quite know, what is the root cause until we identify offenders and go from there.
All right, but the general trend, as I understand it, has been with the shootings last fall and the most recent one on Hillcrest. Those were actually mostly out-of-town offenders or related to something that happened out of town and got followed back to DeKalb.
Correct.
Thank you.
Molly, I have a question. Perhaps you can answer this for the benefit of our audience also. We passed the 2018 budget, but I realize that some of the 2018 numbers will not be translated into money and expense until 2019. Is that correct? Because of the time it takes to hire a police officer? Is that correct, John and Molly? Or I remember discussing this at some length during our budget discussion.
We did. There's I would call it a budget memo from your FY18 budget cycle where it was in October or November. It was presented to council. Actually, it's on the kind of prior council action of that first sheet, if you want to look, or on the police memo. But essentially, with the time to do the police and fire board of review and go through that process, by the time, as Chief explained at the time, there's almost 300 to 400 days before an officer becomes ready to be on the street. So looking for an overtime reduction in fiscal year 18, if you hired right now, it probably wouldn't happen in fiscal year 18. We'd probably only see a partial effect in FY 19 because that's when the officer would be, capable to go out on the street, fully trained, ready to go. And it wouldn't probably even be the full year for 19 at this point.
Thank you. Alderman Jacobson.
Going through these before, I think the most alarming stat that we're seeing is a 40% increase in call volume. I mean, we were talking 2 and 3 years ago how high our call volumes were per officer in comparison to most or all of our comps then, and to see a 40% increase this year, again, I think that's the number that we have to concentrate on more so than anything, is how and why those numbers are jumping so significantly. I mean, 40% is such an unsustainable level in terms of what we can ask these guys to do. At some point, we have to focus on why that's happening and where those changes are coming from to get a grasp of what we can do to start countering some of those increases, and at some point hope to see some decreases, because 40%, I mean, we'll be at or near the high, I'm sure, for most of the Illinois municipalities at this point in terms of calls our officers are receiving right now. If we see another jump like that this year, without a doubt, we'll be number one. And I think that's something I certainly don't have a great grasp of. Is I was talking to one of our commanders today, in fact, having him try to explain how those calls are generated and why they're jumping so quickly. I think that's what we really have to focus on here at some point, is where they're coming from and why, to try to counter some of our existing officers' loads, because they're getting to a point that we can't be number one unless there's a reason for it. Why is that? What is causing that? And how do we counter that? It has to be a priority for us.
Good point.
Can I address that?
Please.
There are, the calls for service are twofold. One are the calls that are incoming to our dispatch center, and the others are self-initiated calls that our officers are making. So, yes, we are getting increased calls into the station, but the COPS details and the POP details that we call them, problem-oriented policing, have never been higher. I mean, we know the goal, the overarching goal is a reduction of crime in the community, and the way we are going about that is by putting assets where the problems are, and we're doing that with these pop details. So the officers are doing many, many more self-initiated details than they had before. Recently, there was the shooting on Hillcrest, and a lot of resources were dedicated to that area. So, and a lot of those were not folks that were calling in to the department to say, can you drive by this building because I think there is a problem there. It's our officers that are self-initiating themselves to deal with the crime problem. And they're doing a great job. And one other thing I'd like to say is that when you engage in community-oriented policing, you're getting to know the community, the residents, and you start to build a level of trust. So when folks, when you have that built, you may actually have an increase in call volume, because folks that would normally never have called the police because they had a general mistrust of them, now they have a relationship. So you would actually see an increase in call volume, which is a testament to that public trust that's earned. So I hope that helped somewhat. But yes, it is it's a tough number to sustain.
Any other questions of Deputy Chief Pietrogallo? Alderman Verbeek.
I would be interested in seeing a number that would allow us to manage problem-oriented policing within regular time instead of overtime. So if we could have a proposal of what we could accomplish with regular time rather than stretching everyone out to get that done, what could it take to get it done in a standard manner?
Sure. And we do it during regular time, regular shifts, and we also do it on overtime hours depending on the need. So when we're at minimum staffing, the opportunities for the officers to engage in these problem-oriented policing details is limited. Sometimes they're assigned at the beginning of the shift, but they go incompleted because they just can't address it. That's where the overtime comes in to engage in these details, where if you're at a minimum staffing, you may never be able to address that pop detail where you're bringing in resources to address the problem, because the problem is serious enough to utilize that overtime. And generally, it is, crimes of violence that we're looking into, and drug investigations that we're trying to, or drug offenses that we're trying to curb. So we do it on both, but we're always trying to do more on our regular shifts.
Any additional questions? Alderman Favor, we welcome you to the meeting. Great to have you here. All of the questions that you had posed have already been answered.
Okay.
No, it's great to have you here, Tony. Any other comments or questions of Deputy Chief Pietrogallo? If not, John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
And we'll move on to the next consideration for this evening's Committee of the Whole meeting, and that is our Information Technology Director, Mark Thorson, to speak on IT. What else, right?
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I appreciate the opportunity. We, in IT, had been building an annual report that we were really excited to give and explain what it is that IT does for the city and with the resources that we have. This gives us an opportunity to also go over the service levels and provide those accomplishments and things that we look forward to as well through this. So information technology for the city consists of 4 full-time employees. There's myself, we have a technical services supervisor, we have an IT technician, and a planning technician. And through that, we have a mission, and Our mission is essentially to get information to the people who need it. We use technology as a medium, but we also look at information by itself and figure out better ways to manage that, get what is needed to the people that need to make decisions, and make it as efficient and timely as possible. We also try to facilitate efficiencies, communication, collaboration throughout the organization to make sure that the customer experience is what it needs to be. We've broken IT down into 4 service categories. So we have technical services, data services, administrative services, and media services. And I'll go through these a little bit more detail, but I want to give you an overview of the things that are on our plate that we try to get done. So the first category is technical services, which is what most people think of when they think of IT. My iPad doesn't work, I need that fixed. It's working on all the different devices that the city has. It's also working on video surveillance, the door access controls. We also work with the cabling and infrastructure, and the audiovisual equipment. Also falls under our purview. The IT department supports over 800 devices throughout the organization and over 40 enterprise applications. And that number fluctuates as we go along. When I came on board, we didn't have a way to track requests. So one of my first initiatives was to get some way to be able to understand what's going on. Prior to that, it was through email, it was through phone calls, and that creates an absolute nightmare for tracking. So in April, we launched a service request system that the city started using. I wanted to start establishing metrics, and this is part of that endeavor, is being able to show what's been done from April to December 31st. Mind you that this number is not exactly complete, so that 675 is probably about 50% of the actual work that's been requested, because as with any project that we do, there's culture change that needs to take place. People need to go in and understand why they're entering a ticket now as opposed to just picking up the phone and calling. And so there's a transition period that we have to acknowledge with that as well. Also, this doesn't incorporate the data services side. That started in January of this year, where for GIS maps and some other things, service tickets started getting entered. I included public safety as one item. That's police and fire department. And I did that because there's a lot of overlap that happens between those two departments. When when one department has a problem, it's typically affecting the other. So it's just another way to look at the distribution of the work. Our service levels are approximated because our system doesn't give us the amount of information we need right now. And that's, as we work through this process, we're collecting better information, more detailed information. Right now, our response time is about an hour, about 60 minutes. And that's roughly when someone enters in a service request, by the time we're able to respond to it, let them know that we're investigating it and start working through it. Sometimes we can do that within moments, and other times it takes us a little bit longer, so that average is about 60 minutes. Same thing with the resolution time. That's actually fixing the problem. So sometimes it can take a few minutes to fix, other times it can take a week. So we average about 16 hours to completion. One of the realignment of sorts that's occurred in 2017 is our IT technician is now stationed over at the police department 2 days a week. And that's in response to the added needs that the public safety departments have. So when that technician is there, that focus is on public safety and making sure that systems are in place and working, so on and so forth. The other thing that we've instituted is an on-call rotation. We are an all-hands-on-deck department, so all of us are pitching in on these things. So at least, every week, one of us is on call for that week. I want to talk a little bit about maturity models, but specifically this one that is outlined in the annual report. The city belongs to an organization of public sector IT professionals called GMIS. The acronym is quite long, so I'll save you from that. But they've come out with a product called TAP, which is Technology Assessment Preparation Program. And it's a first phase into a much larger accreditation program for public sector IT. This product is really geared towards cities, municipalities, counties, park districts, even the state level organizations. And establishing benchmarks that organizations can hold their IT departments accountable for. And so with that, we're able to assess ourselves and figure out where our technology level is overall for the organization. In this, there's a scorecard with over 200 controls that use all sorts of existing, well-established frameworks, and it just gears everything toward public sector and public sector needs. And so this is just a graph explaining where we're at with that. And obviously, the nice part about it is it gives us a sort of a path that we can start taking to make improvements to start moving up in terms of technology maturity. And if you have questions with that, I'm more than happy to answer more on that, but I just want to give an overview of what that means. I've also included just a little snapshot. This isn't our assessment. This is just a randomly completed one, but just to give you an idea of what it might look like and how it scores systems.
Mark,
Yes,
go back to that last slide.
sure.
So that little red dot shows where we are?
Where we are, and we are at an interim level. And it's considered an awareness level. We're able to start establishing what we're doing well and what we need to improve on, and we can start making improvements that way. And I do outline in the annual report, but I also outline in the memo just some things that we are working on towards that improvement. In 2017, we had in terms of technical services category. We had the public safety server and storage project. This was obviously a big deal because we need to make sure that we're protecting all of the city's environment in terms of data, but also public safety as well. So we had established that, and this project took a little bit longer than normally, but because we were very careful about how we were moving things over. We obviously don't want service interruptions with that. We also had, I want to highlight that we had an expanded data backup system that we did. This is not everything, but this is just some of the highlights that we've done. Service request system, which I brought up. Alternative technology in the fire department was an interesting one. We're constantly looking at ways to find more cost-effective ways to provide technology to the public safety departments because their technology tends to be the most expensive in the city. So what we try to do is figure out ways to find costs. We talk to our colleagues and get some information on what we could do better. So we've put in a pilot program in one of the fire vehicles, and we've gotten some overall really good feedback on it. So we're going to keep looking at expanding it, and it ended up with a cost savings with that. We also implemented a video conferencing product. It helps with training. It helps with meetings. It helps not having to get in the car, spend gas to get to another building to be able to do training or whatever whatever it might need. So we've built a foundation for that, and now we're expanding it. So the next category is data services. This encompasses GIS, which is the mapping, data visualization aspects of what we do. We also have to worry about data management. So we look at the databases, and we have folks that work into that and make sure that we're ensuring that data is enabled and available and not corrupt. Software application deployment, data integration, being able to have two different systems talk to each other, and be able to develop, send out targeted software development as well. We don't do a lot of development, we just do very specific things, and I'll talk about that. So just some of the 2017 accomplishments for data services. We created a master address and parcel information number table. This is a big deal because we don't want different addresses and different PIN numbers showing up in different systems. They all need a single source of truth, for lack of a better phrase. Another thing was through the NIU internship program, we had someone develop a commercial property system for community development. That allows community development to maintain the property information and descriptions for advertising purposes and be able to drum up business for the city. One thing we're very proud of is our planning technician worked really hard to use a collector application through our GIS system, and it allows Public Works to be able to enter asset information directly into GIS while they're out in the field. We continue to add more layers to provide more maps and availability. And finally, for the parking amnesty program for the police department, we were able to put together an online payment system for that deadline and be able to, and we feel that provided more ticket payments than would have happened otherwise had we not had that system in place. Administrative services encompasses the general administrative tasks, but I want to highlight that this also encompasses project management. And a lot of the technology projects, IT is called on to be the project manager or help facilitate the project manager, if that might be done through a consultant or a contractor. We also do compliance work for the city. So we work with the departments to establish compliances like PCI for credit card acceptance, criminal justice systems, all the compliances that the city is obligated to maintain. We work with the departments to facilitate that. And in terms of accomplishments for that, we've built a cyber incident response plan. We hope never to have to use it, but we wanted to make sure we had one in place, and that's been filed with emergency management. We also developed some breach notification plans, which is actually a requirement for the city to have in place in certain areas, so we've been able to build those. We also have a data backup retention policy to make sure that we're following records records retention policies. One of the things that we do that may not hit the radar of the community is we do a lot of on-site training for employees. Very recently for Office 365, we were holding voluntary training for the employees over their lunch break and actually go through all of the intricacies of what they're able to do and help them achieve the city's goals by using the technology to its fullest. We also do that through the employee newsletter. We do this for security purposes too. We offer phishing training, phishing email training through our employee newsletter. If there's something that comes out and we notice it, we'll put it out there for people to see so they know to be aware of that and make sure that their radar's on. Finally, the last category is our media services. It's Channel 14, it's the city website, the maintenance and support of it, it's the videography for the meetings, it's also the desktop publishing that happens for a variety of different departments that require it. Some of the accomplishments from this past year is the technology in the council chambers. We received feedback from meeting attendees. There were issues with people not being able to see presentations, not be able to hear presentations. So we worked through those issues and figured out ways to accommodate that. You can see with the new monitors. But behind the scenes was earlier in the year we had the wireless system to be able to, for hearing impaired people to be able to hear the meetings while they attend. We also have the broadcast equipment for Channel 14 is something that we are constantly evaluating and figuring out ways to improve on it, make sure it's resilient. So we start phasing in equipment as we can replace it through a strategy. We also have website improvements. I've made dozens of improvements based on community feedback to be able to improve the system. And additionally, we're scheduled for a redesign in February of 2018. So we're planning on how we're going to be able to do that and also incorporate community involvement with it. So just some of the current projects that we're working on as we speak. With regards to public safety and economic development focus, we are working still on that downtown Wi-Fi project. We have a contractor quotes in place. We're working directly with NIU to start getting shovels in the ground and making this happen to meet our deadlines. We also are, in terms of increasing operating efficiencies, ERP system. We have that. We are having our kickoff meeting on April 3rd. This is all hands on deck, and we are going to have an outline plan of attack to be able to get through this, figure out what systems need to be done when, how they're going to be done in parallel or in series. So we're figuring out how all of this is going to transition as we move on to this new system. SmartGov is a software program that's for community development, and it's basically getting community development permitting and licensing off of paper-based systems, get it into an electronic system, start to improve customer service with being able to provide information at the employee's fingertips. And of course, the Office 365 implementation. We had a bit of a setback. About 2 weeks we were down because Microsoft was not allowing, there was a glitch, wasn't allowing any more conversions. So that finally got lifted, and now we're back on track to get that moved over. For the elected officials, I'll be getting in touch with you individually as we migrate your mailbox out to the new environment. So keep an eye out for an email from me, and I'll keep you in the loop as we go through it. And with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but I'm hopeful that this gives you an idea of the value and what you're getting from the IT department.
You know, I know technology has allowed organizations and even those of us who are not necessarily geeks, but those of us who are interested in technology in our own homes, that technology has allowed us to do a heck of a lot more with a heck of a lot less. And, you know, when I joined the city as its mayor 10 months ago, I couldn't believe at all of the things that were getting done with a staff of 4 or 5 people. I noticed you didn't have the mayor's office on that matrix. I must have called you at least 10 times over the last couple of weeks as we converted to the 365.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I would have called Alderman Jacobson, who is somewhat of a geek. However, he was out doing something else, so I had to call you, Mark. So with that, let's see if there are any questions of Mark regarding our IT in the city. Alderman Noriko.
I have the sense from reading the backup material and also seeing where we're at on that chart in terms of level of competence or, you know, I'm not sure, technical.
We like to use maturity because it's not so much a competency thing as
yes, I'm sorry.
as there's an evolution that occurs.
I was struggling for, thank you.
Yeah.
So my sense is we have a long way to go, for example, to be paperless. Is it a matter of equipment or staff or what would help the city truly move forward in that area? Now, having asked that question, I'm not promising we can do everything, but, you know, just to have, you know, an understanding. In other words, would some, you know, true investment in technology reap, you know, significant rewards? Because sometimes you have to put money in to get, you know, benefits.
You're hitting the point that it's an investment. There's a return that you're expecting on that, and that's what we're trying to provide through this. I don't think that there is there's a combination of things that have to occur to be able to manage that. I'm not going to lie to you, we reduced staff in this budget year. It doesn't feel good. We're managing, and that's what makes us an all-hands-on-deck department.
Well, I notice you're on the on-call rotation, for example.
Because I need to make sure that everybody has an adequate amount of time to get away from it and then be able to come back to avoid, you know, any burnout issues or things of that nature. But there's also just having that redundancy. Having that second technician is important from that aspect. We're operating on the way we can, and we're making that work. If we, there's a lot to your question with that. There's a resource investment that needs to be addressed as well, and that is, how are we looking at the technology that we're putting in place? In some areas, there wasn't technology. In other areas, the technology was disjointed. What I'm trying to do from a department level, working with all of the other departments, is try and encapsulate that and figure out what the best strategy is moving forward. And that's what the background is for that ERP system, the SmartGov system, the Office 365 systems that we're putting in place. That puts us one step closer to that idea of being paperless. But it's not just the paper, it's also the accessibility of the information. Paper is awful for accessibility. If I have to go and look something up and it's on hard copy, it's going to take a while. And that's why in some cases we have to tell residents to come back at a later time when we can go to cold storage and pull something out, or have to go through file cabinets and pull something out. So we're trying to address that through the investment we're making, and we're making sure that we're trying to establish guidelines moving forward so that we're constantly building and maturing that system. The other piece is culture change. People are always resistant to change, so we're trying to work that aspect of it as well. And that's part of project management, that's part of the education piece, the training piece that goes on. We're trying to educate the employees to help them understand your time is much more valuable than running around trying to find papers. You need that information at your fingertips. And then we can start providing better services and better benefit to the city, to the residents, by getting more information easier to access. I hope I answered your question with that, because there was a lot
I
to go
realized
on.
there was no easy answer. And also I noticed, and I think you did, briefly address it in the backup material, Public Works, compared to the other departments, they had virtually no requests for you, like 31 or something.
Yes.
So, and I think you indicated that it's because they don't have much to ask questions about, basically,
Yeah.
Are they truly, drowning in paper and that's it, or?
Yeah, and I think that our Public Works Director would agree that there's a lot of areas that they could use technology. One of the things that we have done over this past year is our planning technician working with Public Works to get that collector application working. And that's a big deal because we, for permitting reasons and a whole host of reasons, need better information about what's in the utility easements and what's going on, so that when new projects come in, we have a good idea of where things are and it's up to date. So that was one aspect that's getting us in a step in that right direction. The ERP is going to help out as well, because we're going to have better understanding of the assets that are not only in the ground but are being used by the employees, and be able to. There's another chart in that annual report that's under the data services, and it's called the data maturity model. It's similar to technology but focused on data. And it goes over the four levels of analytics. The first is descriptive. It's just trying to find out what happened. The second is diagnostic. Well, now I know what happened. Now I want to know why it happened. The third level is predictive. Now I know what happened. I know why it happened. So now I'm going to determine what will happen. And then the fourth level is prescriptive, where I can take all of that information and now I can start tweaking things and saying, all right, I know this will happen if I do this, but if I tweak this, now what's going to happen? So there's also that learning curve that we're trying to get through as well. And right now we're on the lower end of the descriptive side. And we're trying to work our way up by collecting more data and having systems in place to be able to use it.
Well, and then also, as you said, employees will have to be trained how to look at the data, what to do with it, think about it. It's a whole different level of thinking.
And that can be critical to project success. And that's why, I mean, I'm still having training for Office 365 to get people indoctrinated into why it's good and what it can do to benefit them.
Okay.
And if I may add, I'll touch on the training real quick. Training is very critical, but it's voluntary. I mean, we don't have the funds to make it required. So we can't bring back the entire police department because that would be on overtime in order to train them. So we are hoping that through the voluntary participation of the training, the word will spread of the benefits of the technology and create that culture and that buy-in of embracing technology and utilizing systems to, fullest functionality to be more efficient and engaged in that new world of thinking. But to go back to, if I may add to the going paperless question, that has been a goal that from day one when I arrived here, Mark and I have had the fortunate experience of living through a transition, at least I did, of going paperless at a municipality. And we've researched document management systems. We have researched what it would take to go paperless. Unfortunately, with certain staff limitations, it's a little bit of staff doing things on a as-can basis of scanning documents and being able to make them electronic. We've also attempted to get outside resources to help with the scanning initiative and just rip the Band-Aid off, but due to very competing interests during the budget process, those things don't make it to the approved budget. So we definitely know what it takes to go paperless, but unfortunately, it requires resources to do so. We are doing what we can when there's downtime to scan. Going forward, staff has been directed that stop the paper, create electronic forms, fillable PDFs, scan everything as soon as you get it, save it on a shared drive where it's backed up, and stop putting things in file cabinets. So that is an expectation that we've established.
Okay.
But there's so much paper, years and years worth of paper, that eventually we absolutely do need to address. Paper's turning yellow and crusty and moldy because it's been around that long. Right, and we have made significant efforts of at least bringing essential documents here to City Hall. We've cleaned out the basement and have created space for documents so that we don't have our only full-time employee who's handling permits gone for 3 hours looking for that one document being requested and a FOIA request, for instance. And that is the reality for that department. We've minimized that by bringing documents here to City Hall. So I just wanted it to be noted that we are absolutely sensitive to the need to go paperless. We have...
Yeah, there are limitations.
Yeah, we've absolutely established a culture and an expectation that you reduce paper and use PDFs and scanning and as we go forward. But eventually, we do have to address the abundancy of paper that goes back many, many, many years. And hopefully, through one of these budget processes, we'll be able to close that loop even further.
I'd like you to clarify one thing for me, though, Patty, and that is something you said, that all of our training is on a volunteer basis?
The training that IT does is on a voluntary basis.
For just the police and public safety, or for all
For all
departments?
employees. For all employees, we're doing lunch and learns. So you bring your lunch, and we'll give you a topic to learn.
I love lunch and learns. I
Yes.
love lunch sometimes more than learn. But I'll tell you this, doesn't that sound counterproductive, though? That we want our people to be tech savvy, but we don't take the time out of their busy schedule to almost, I don't want to say demand, but to encourage strongly.
We do encourage strongly for those exempt employees who work a Monday through Friday schedule. What I'm saying is for those 24/7 or non-exempt field personnel, like fire, like police, like some of Public Works, it would require overtime for us to demand that, or require that they go through the training. So this type of training, unfortunately, is just not something that is budgeted.
I guess I don't understand.
If I can ask, now, if we're talking about the training with the police do on their computers on the field work, that is mandatory training on those computers, right?
You want-
We have a variety. We have a variety of different types of training. Some is mandatory, some is not. Generally, what we try to do is we try to do a lot of training in service that does not accrue overtime. We've been doing more with getting officers certified as trainers so they can train our own people rather than sending them to Rockford or Springfield, for example. So the more we can do that, the more we can train in-house. But the field training level that a new officer goes through, all of that training is mandatory. Anything that they need to do to conduct their duties is all mandatory, but it's all done on duty. We do have occasion where we'll bring off-duty officers back to train on overtime, but we try to limit that as much as possible.
Thank you.
That was the point of my question.
Yeah,
That
the
is,
more-
If you have somebody, even if they are a non-exempt employee, and they are working 37 to 40 hours a week on straight time, not on overtime, doesn't it make sense at times to say, we need to spend 3 hours this week during your regular office hours to learn Office 365? Doesn't that make sense?
Absolutely, Mayor, but for police, especially in patrol or for investigations, that means that there isn't someone on the street.
Yeah, I guess I'm not,
So for us to say, Officer Jones in squad car so-and-so in this, area patrolling, come and join us for Office 365 training,
course.
and
of course.
calls won't be answered, it's not feasible. So, trust me, we highly encourage and twist arms and make it required as to the extent that we can. But unfortunately, for IT training, that's an area that not everyone is able to participate in because of service level needs and our sensitivity to overtime.
Okay, thank you. I'll get off my soapbox.
Jerry?
Alderman Fanouken.
I was also going to add that, like, for the fire department, we had the discussion, too, when we were talking about them doing inspections. It's difficult when you're doing some training and you have to go out to a call and then to come back to the training because either the person doing the training is no longer available or, because of the length of the call, you're no longer available to take it. So that's part of the problem of why trying to do it during regular hours of service is very difficult.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman Jacobson.
Do we offer any training opportunities to these guys when they're out when they're hurt? I mean, seeing that we had 31 officers hurt last year, again, they're getting paid for that time to be home. Can we bring them back during that hurt time, both in police and fire, and give them some of these trainings so that they're up to speed while they're effectively off on the clock, but not in a car?
It depends on their limitations that their doctors have for them, but absolutely. We've got a few officers now that are on light duty, alternate productive duty, that are getting a lot of training. And we will capitalize on that by sending them to training that they normally would not be able to get to just because of the staffing limitations.
Wonderful.
Alderman Favor.
I had a question on the video conferencing tools. What does that consist of? Is that a standalone program, or what is?
Right now, it's a standalone program. We're using a product called Adobe Connect, and it's been piloted in the fire department, and they were using that for testing purposes. to see if they could conduct training and also to maybe do roll calls and things like that through the system. And it took a little while because it's a culture change, so we're working with them on that, and we're also evaluating if there might be some systems that we're already using that might be able to help with that and maybe even save some cost there. So
That was going to be one of my questions. So does that require additional cameras and equipment?
it did in some circumstances. For some of the locations, we had to, but it was a very minimal expense. It was a couple webcams that we were hooking up to existing laptops that would allow them to be able to grab the whole room and do their work, so.
Okay, how does that compare to like a Skype for Business?
That's actually what we're looking at as, as an option. There's some features in Skype that we're learning about that might be able to facilitate some other help, so.
Okay. Then the other question, or not, it's more of a comment. I know the answer is going to be, we need more staff, but the city has not put in place a document retention plan, and looking at it, we can put in a document retention plan. We have to make all the files. We can set the dates on the files, and we have to give access to those files before they're destroyed. We have to make a public announcement. We have to make the files available, and we have to document what's in them. But I said this, when I first came on, we need a document retention plan, and all the stuff that's sitting in warehouses, all the brown paper that's years old that we've had forever, we need to destroy it and get rid of it. We need to have a plan and then get rid of all this and get rid of all this, the cost of storing all this documentation.
And actually, we've started that, Alderman Favor. We've been working closely with Steve Calese from the Records Retention Office for the state, and he's visited us several times. And Aaron Stevens from the City Manager's Office is coordinating those efforts with each department. He has met with every department, and we actually had a big shredding day when we,
right.
Aaron is filing with Steve Calase's office and getting the appropriate certifications in order for us to destroy documents for certain periods of time. Once we file for that authorization to destroy the records, we received the certification, and then Aaron coordinated for those records to be, what we actually did is hauled them all. Public Works did us, the service of gathering all the boxes that were appropriate labeled and inspected, ensured that those were the documents that were approved, and we went to a free shredding facility, and just really while on the clock, we pulled some Public Works staff to load the truck, drive it over to Aurora, I believe the facility is, I don't know, Aurora, and the documents were destroyed. So we are going to be doing that on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
And with other competing projects, we're trying to stay on that quarterly cycle, but there are the records that I'm speaking on that need to be are the records that need to be retained for, where we cannot destroy because the state does not permit it until 20 years after this case is closed, and
Sure.
Things of that sort, or historical records that need to be kept, those of legal importance. Community development has a lot of those records that are still being held on to, and those are the documents that we need to begin to scan and put in a records management system. So, no, we don't need more staff to do that, because we've already started that, and we will continue with that effort in order to destroy what it is we can destroy per the Records Retention Office.
Great. Thank you.
Alderman Jacobson.
Are we doing any, obviously, especially now with 365, obviously it's a very labor-intensive process for you specifically that's going and doing a lot of these trainings. I mean, is there any way we can do them as video tutorials that all staff can do them, whether they're at home or they're on lunch or they want to watch it on their phone or however they want to do it? Are we undertaking that at this point?
Yeah, actually, the company we're working with, Liftoff, has those built, and they are willing to also modify them to meet our needs. The on-site training is to cover some of the aspects directly related to that department or that area. Also, it provides question and answer time, and I've gotten a lot of good questions and even some really good ideas that I hadn't thought of through that process that I can turn around now and go back and use. I'm working with some ideas with the police department to figure out ways to help the officers on the street through Office 365. So there's some ideas we're bouncing around, some things I hadn't even thought of that are coming out of those on-site, in-person trainings. But absolutely, we do have on-demand videos that we're going to be producing. And we're also going to be hitting roll calls in order to kind of help over the period of time to get some information out there so they're not blindsided by this. But we also want to have those on-demand videos they can use.
And Alderman James, if I may add, the performance management software system, everything that HR rolled out as part of our new electronic performance reviews was videotaped and then provided through the employee intranet so that employees can see it at their leisure. And our HR director put together a nice comprehensive email with links to the various resources. Not only did we videotape it for employees to access, we also created quick how-to guides and little tutorials so people can watch and read and click to access those resources. So HR is actually using a lot of that resource because, again, it's difficult to make it required for everyone to attend, so we're highly encouraging and making videos available, and IT has helped with those efforts.
I should also mention that the city management office management analysts have been instrumental in creating those videos as well. Specifically, some of the ones that we've had to do for the request tracker system and some of the other sites that we've done in the past. So,
Are there any other questions of our IT director, Mark Thorson? Mark, I appreciate your comments. I want you to stick up there one time. I want to tell you something that's happened and happening. It took me several months to realize, after having comments made to me after a meeting, that actually we were getting emails during our meetings. And people were asking questions. Since, I just wanted to check to see if that was happening tonight. Already tonight, 2 residents have asked questions regarding this meeting, but, this is another space age kind of thing that maybe we're going to have to take a look at sometime. Can people email their questions if they can't come to City Hall? We've been criticized because often we have taken somebody's email and wanted to read them, and people say, you shouldn't do that. The people ought to come to the meeting and stand at that podium and address this council. So, I don't know, I don't know if you have a take on that, but, I guess we could have public participation electronically.
I'd want to defer to our city attorney on that before we make any commitments to the community.
Patty, all I'm saying is that, hey, maybe,
I know, Mayor.
This old guy, sometimes I even get my technological questions whirling around in my head, so.
But why not? Let's go virtual.
one other thing is, I believe we are live streaming at this point. Our YouTube service, I believe, has been reinstated.
So, some of our folks out there will be so happy, won't they?
For now.
Yeah.
For now.
Any other questions? Mark, thank you. Now, I don't believe there probably is much public participation, but Alderman Fagan has a...
One more thing, I think we
Yeah.
needed to clarify something on our line item presentation. What I wanted to do is omit the whole thing now. We just omitted what was put on. I want to take everything off because there was the additional 4th item that I think that discussion needs to be talked about at the same time with the other 3.
Right.
So my motion is to eliminate that whole line item, the first selection of fiscal year 2018 line item presentation, and put it back up on the next agenda.
And the next agenda, on the next budget workshop, kind of.
Or at the next council meeting?
Well, we're pressing on time, aren't we?
Well, we could take what we've already prepared for tonight, if we're removing it, and I'll have Molly tweak it to get it on Monday's agenda. Everyone should have received a communication that we're looking at April 4th for that additional budget
Right.
workshop that
Right.
council
So
requested. So we really need some direction in advance of that April 4th if the request is still for us to begin with a detailed review of the FY18 budget, starting with the city manager's office. So I'd hate to waste the April 4th meeting to sit and talk about what options do you want. So we can commit to having something on Monday's agenda as
That'd be great.
as a discussion item
Okay.
to get input on the four options.
That's
All right, so I want to make that motion to eliminate that line item.
Well, we did already.
We did already, didn't we?
For tonight.
For tonight.
I thought we just took off what was added onto it from Monday. If you got it in the minutes and we took it all off, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we took it all
did.
off, yeah.
All right, that's fine.
I'd prefer you
That was
leave it
my
on.
interpretation.
Pardon me?
I'd prefer you leave it on.
You can make that motion.
Okay,
Can I add some more questions I have?
Sure.
To get feedback from council, because it was, the original first memo tonight had the line item discussion as just one kind of section that we're looking at, and I wanted to make sure with city council, if you looked at page 4, that the change in the order of the departments we are reviewing, if that is the guidance that council would like to see this order, if this is the preferred order now. So actually on page 3, it changed to April 4th. That would be the city manager's office, legal and legislative services, and then we go from there, if this is
So
an
we start
acceptable
there.
order.
Yes, that's where we start.
okay.
Okay, so that's where we're starting.
So
And
are the rest of the dates okay, or do we need to adjust the 17th, April 17th, May 22nd, and June 19th? We received direction that the meeting between March 2nd and April 17th, which is now tentatively April 4th, to start with city manager's office, but then we took are providing a recommendation. Is that the order for the rest of the departments, or would you like to see something different?
Are you saying, but we're starting with one office at our time, are you talking about city manager office, legal and legislative services on the 4th?
That would be on the 4th. I mean,
All three.
it's not that large of budget, so we
Okay.
believe in one meeting, we could
Right.
accomplish all three, and then focus April 17th on community development and human resources, community development being a larger budget and human resources being a smaller one. So we're trying to pair them up to keep,
Right, I see what you're doing.
Time,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
That
late-
looks good. That's
okay.
fine.
Is that okay?
And then Public Works and Finance, again, a larger department with a smaller department, and ending with Fire, one of our second largest. So, and at any time, if you like to change this order, we are more than willing to do so, but this is the direction we're going to work under.
Okay, good.
And I have one more follow-up. So the
Yes, Mel.
expectation then for those meetings is, and we can discuss it, where maybe it's put kind of the thought into your minds now that we're going to talk about the line items on Monday, is do you want to continue with the service level kind of reviews that you've seen now and then go into line item reviews, or continue how we are, or switch just to line item reviews? So I will ask you that question again on Monday, but it's, you know, put it into your thoughts now, and then we can get feedback and work on how we structure those, once we have your feedback on what you want to see for line item reviews on Monday.
And we can condense this, if tonight's was too long on each department, and you're concerned with if this length of presentation going forward, plus line item review of the FY18 budget would make for too long of a presentation, we could eliminate the service level reviews and just stick with the budget. We can condense it to say, quick 5 to no more than 8-minute overview, and then dive into the budget. So that, the logistics of the meeting, direction from the council would be, the bottom line is, we want to make sure we're going to achieve in these meetings exactly what you want. So the more, direction you provide, the better we'll be able to meet your requests. And we are prepared to meet that request to its extent.
Well, I certainly think this city council is stanced right now to ask for what we need. There is no doubt in my mind. I mean, this is more information from what I've told that the city council has ever seen in the past. Am I correct, Dave, with that? Huh?
It is significantly more than the last council. so.
Right, right. So, and I think that's good. And I think it behooves all of us to take the time to go through those printouts. And, you know, we're not going to go line by line, but we're going to take a look at those things which, for lack of a better thing, are red flag to us. You know, red flag meaning it could be very good, it could be not so good. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Anything else, Molly?
No, that's all I had.
I don't believe we have any public participation. We appreciate those who have been here and those who are watching at home. I understand that there may be a need for an executive session of the council and that we will take a recess. I would need a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we, excuse me.
You need to read why.
Oh, yes, oh, absolutely. Approval to hold an executive session to discuss personnel as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C1. Was moved by Alderman Jacobson, seconded by Alderman Verbeek. Any discussion on the motion to recess for that executive session? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
We are now in recess of this committee of the whole meeting.
Large conference room.
Yeah, large conference room, okay, guys? Yeah. I didn't mention this before, but you had